Hello, I'm Michael Lambert, a fellow in social inequalities here at Lancaster University. Again, speaking about the showcasing the work that we do in researching and learning and acting about inequalities. So, can I begin by asking, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Roger. Academically, I usually go under my full name, Roger Haydon Mitchell, because there's so many Roger Mitchells that, like, academia are everlastingly sending me all sorts of information about papers I didn't write on the assumption I might have. So I tend to go for that full name, and I would describe myself as a political theologian and activist. I'm an alumni of Lancaster. I've been knocking around a long time. So I did my first degree here like many, many moons ago, and my master's way back. And in those days, I was particularly focusing on literature. My first degree was in English with religious studies. So that's my kind of background. I came back in 2005 to do a PhD, having spent a lifetime really as a kind of experimental activist, working with different forms of community, particularly from a Christian background, which is my my kind of cultural and churchmanship background. But my particular interest in returning was to try and see what in the world meant that the kind of radical Christianity that you can seemingly find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, how it ended up with the kind of colonial, imperial versions of Christianity that have kind of marked Christendom pretty much since the 4th century. So my PhD was in Church, Gospel, and Empire, how the politics of sovereignty impregnated the West. And so my interest all along has been in the inequalities that an understanding of politics in terms of top-down kind of vertical sovereignty, how that has impacted particularly the West, because you've got to draw the line somewhere. And so that was my research. But all along, my practice was to try and discover a kind of more horizontal politics, and which pretty much has meant that I've developed it's almost like with a whole load of mates, a kind of practical and academic school in terms of the politics of love. And in different parts of the world, different people work on that together with me and other mates of mine.
Organic and bottom up and interwoven through those kinds of academic and kind of practical dimensions as well. So you've already effectively answered my my second question, which is what do you do? So can I move on to the third in thinking how you go about doing it?
Yeah. I think I've been unusually fortunate in that I've been self-employed doing this. This whole kind of what people call a mixed portfolio of things, but kind of activism, research, writing, consulting, demonstrating, advocating since 1974. And so while I've had, in all sorts of ways, I've worked with different organizations, different universities or expressions of study and the like, and published with a whole variety of different authors. But I've had the good fortune, together with my partner Sue, of kind of doing our own thing. So enough people believed in us that for many, many years now, we've had a trust, which is a charitable trust, which extraordinarily we are actually the objects of, which is quite unusual. So it's meant that we can, we've never been overly well off, but enough people have kind of given into what we do that it's meant that, and also charging for various things that we do in terms of consultation. That's how we've survived. So we're not, we're not paid by the university. I was part of a Richardson Institute for a few years in PPR, and I taught there a particular module on on peace, reconciliation, and the politics of Jesus. But I basically have continued to be hands-on in activism and kind of head-on in research and writing.
But there's almost
ended up in CASE.
Continuing over time, there's an authenticity, a kind of a value in trying to, rather than impose things from above or have these kinds of moments. It's been a real sort of lived process for you, shall we say, from all these years in trying to work, research, study, understand, and engage with these issues as they sort of come across of inequalities.
Yeah, absolutely right. And our trust is basically describes itself as helping people relate to and manage socio-cultural and intellectual change. So and that has meant that despite the fact getting on in years, hopefully we've sort of kept abreast of what's going on. And I think that's one of the big advantages of staying in activism and trying to do research alongside it, particularly of a qualitative kind. Not that I'm against quantitative research, but the kind of longitudinal stuff that comes with having lived quite a long time works well.
No, absolutely. It's that kind of situated way of understanding things and those change and those kinds of real meanings rather than kind of more, I suppose, a crude statistical or abstracted form, right? It's the value that's there.
Yeah, which is why within CASE, together with Imogen and a few others of us, we have begun to put together this Lancaster University Social Action Research Group, LUSAG, and I think there's still lots more to do with that. But it's been great to see how the Black History projects come out of that, and to see that we've now got we've got two researchers who are within the department, but also kind of put their feet within that group in order to work alongside what we're doing with the Morecambe Bay Poverty Truth Commission, to have some kind of proper research alongside that for round 2, which has just recently begun. And also coming from that commission has been a joint project with both the Citizens Advice Bureau and the NHS, called a Citizens Rep, exploring how we can help people with complex needs, which include poverty, but also include mental and physical ill health. And so we're beginning to do some evaluation research alongside that too.
Now, I mean, you've already mentioned quite a few of these just in passing throughout the conversation we've been having, but can you give or perhaps reiterate one of the examples of how your work deals directly with inequalities?
I don't think I can. I don't think there's anything better than the Poverty Truth Commission as an example of this. I think that rather than delve too deeply into the commission itself and how it works, people can find that brilliantly from our Facebook page and particularly from our website. You just Morecambe Bay Poverty Truth Commission will find you those pages if you search on Google or whatever. But I think that the most key thing about the Poverty Truth Commission is the way in which it enables space to be held in which people with lived experience of poverty can begin to find their feet and express themselves on an equal footing with the people who hold the levers of power. And that has been that's been extremely exciting. And just to cite particular examples of that, my good friend Dusty Roberts, who is a commissioner and part of the facilitation team, has himself, as a result of his engagement with the Morecambe Bay Poverty Truth Commission, not only been positioned as a significant policy maker, but has also set up his own charity, Let's Be Friends, which befriends people who are coming out of homelessness or coming out of various forms of recovery, and who again and again and again, what tends to happen is it's not all bad out there in terms of what can be provided for people when they're coming out of prison or recovering, or coming out of PSD or something like that. But the difficulty is they're often left alone at the time when they're nearly through, and then they fall back again. So the befriending is really crucial, and to have been part of that and to see that as an outcome of what we've been doing in Poverty Truth has been great.
So the final question that I have for you is about examples of groups, bodies, partners, stakeholders that you work with. Now, I think already you've talked quite extensively about that as part of your own kind of involvement in working towards alternatives for inequalities. So I was wondering if you talk a little bit more about your involvement in this idea of Kenarchy and the journal that you're involved with, because I think there's an awful lot here that touches upon this intersection between your activism, but also then your research in a very sort of practical, applied and learned way too.
Yeah, by all means. The whole idea of Kenarchy is to find a way of expressing the radical aspects that come from what theologically one calls an incarnational approach, which is basically taking the testimony of Jesus that you find in the four Gospels. Like I spent this morning in a very significant discussion about what it means, what that story where Jesus washed the disciples' feet, which actually, and provably, only a female slave was allowed to do. So if someone who is kind of purporting to be God takes the position of a female slave, something that kind of turns the value system of the Roman Empire completely upside down is taking place. So, but trying to find a way of talking about those extraordinary counter-cultural, counter-political aspects of incarnational theology, and talking about them as something that still can be applied relevantly in the 21st century. And so the opposite of sovereignty politically is kenosis. It's instead of dominating top down, it's if you've got power, you see it as something that's a gift that you give away. And so Kenarchy is looking at the different aspects of that giving away of power. And it has had quite some momentum. And so we found ourselves founding an academic journal called the Kenarchy Journal, which again you can find online. Kenarchy is the idea of kenosis, or giving, ken, and archy, obviously, all the different archies, political formation. One of the exciting things has been just how relevant this is proving to be. So we were approached, those of us who are the kind of editorial board, just recently by the Institute for Religion, Peace and Justice, which is based in St. Stephen's University in Canada on the Western Coast. Without going into details, I've got relationships and friendships, but they asked if that could become the IRPJ's journal. So that has immediately opened a massive other network to our own. But it's entirely collaborative and egalitarian in the approach. So they're not taking us over, but we're not dominating them. And you can see ways in which those kinds of partnerships work.
No, definitely. I think a very logical extension from what you're saying about the whole sort of principle behind it, in a way, kind of way of reaching a bigger audience, kind of larger momentum as a result too.
Yeah.
Roger, thanks ever so much for your time today and for talking with me about your work and involvement with inequalities.
Super. I'm just really glad to be able to engage with the department and with the institute in this way. It's been I think it's been mutually positive. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.